Picked the wrong week and quit sniffing glue.
Well, good morning. Welcome back. It is a new project. It's Monday. It's time to start something new. And this is going to be, even though it is something new, it's kind of a continuation of where we left last week with the big Frankenstein lab, because I still have Frankie to paint. Now, this was not part of the Stan Arts kit. This is the Moebius Frankenstein. So I'm going to be adding him as set dressing. Now, I've got something special that I am cooking in the 3D printer this week. I was sent a file from a person who purchased it online that is going to be very apropos of the Frankenstein lab. But I'm also going to be working this week on the Vampirella kit. This is the 1/6 scale Vampirella kit. Comes from a company called X Plus. I don't think I've ever done an X Plus kit. Seems to be very Aurora style. Seems to be very similar in things we have seen before, either in the Batman kits or any of the Wonder Woman kits. Matter of fact, I was going to do this earlier, but then I realized I had just done the Wonder Woman, and this is very similar. It's a beautiful woman in a skimpy costume, and who doesn't like that? What a way to start the week. What I do like is that they're actually giving you tips on how to paint the face. That's something that's new. Where to put the highlights, where to put the shadows and the blushes and things like that. That's something, a single guy like me might like to know. So, not having a lot of experience with where to put the blush, even though I did those Sucker Punch gals a while back, but that's neither here nor there. Let's get out the parts and start working on the Vampirella. Now, this is, like I said, very similar to model kits we've all seen before, as far as, it's a right and left half of a leg. Although I have to tell you, I've never seen a kit where the hair makes up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think there are, by the time you add the bangs on there, there are 3 pieces of hair. But I will tell you, and the boots are, they have their own, the high heels have their own number of parts. It's like left, right, and sole, and then left and right on the boot going up the leg. Because this is a curvy female figure, getting rid of the seams is going to be the big important thing. Now, they have cooked in some of the seam work where the costume meets, obviously on the pelvis there and around the neckline. But you always have those darn pesky shoulders, where if the shoulders are bare and you are trying to fit the... it's the same problem we had with Wonder Woman, in that getting that rounded shoulder was an important bit of sanding that needed to be done. So I'm going to start snipping the parts off of the sprues and doing a lot of the left and right matching up of things, so that we can get some of these sub-assemblies going, and then we'll carry it on from there. But like I said, painting this gal and Frankie this week might be the lion's share of the work we do. Okay, so I've got enough of Vampy together that I can test fit the whole build and see the important things, which seams will end up showing and which ones won't. I could have spent a whole lot of time and stress filling in the back of her hair, for example, but none of that is seen, so you don't have to worry about that. You do have to do this seam here, but you don't have to worry about any of that in there. You will have to worry significantly about that shoulder joint. That's going to take a lot of putty, and so is this. That elbow joint is going to take some puttying. Don't have to worry about the hip seams, because that's in the costume line. There is a lot of the seam that's going down her thigh here is covered by her hand and arm. So yeah, you still have to mess with that, but it's not quite as vital as you might think. This one is a big obvious seam that needs to get taken care of and sanded carefully. it's going to be a tough thing here, because painting her costume, what little of it there is going to have to be done. See, here's the tricky joint. It is right here, because you need to paint that line in and get all of that cleaned up before you put this right arm on, and it's going to need to be cleaned up on top of that. So you're going to have to paint that, mask it fairly well before you attach the right arm. The left arm has the same problem, but not to as big a degree. You will have this major seam going down the inside of the bicep and into her the shank. The whole length of her arm right there is a seam that has to be addressed. The one in the back also needs to be, again, because of the amount of that is covered with the hair. You can get away with not doing all of it, but definitely from here down you need to have that looked after. So that's why we do all of that, because that will save us from some work. Now obviously the seams where her boots start, we don't have to worry about that because that's a boot, but we do have some filling. This is not a I'll have to go back and check. I believe that is a full-length boot. I don't think that is supposed to be stockings going into a pump type shoe. No, that is meant to be all one boot. Now if that were something like either a Sucker Punch or Jessica Rabbit or something, you could believe that perhaps this was a stocking or something going into a regular shoe. But the way I believe it's constructed, that's all meant to be a solid boot. So there's going to have to be some seam filling on that, and then painted with a glossy black. I might check to see if there's some warrant at making a mask to keep her flesh separate from the red of her costume. That might be worth investigating. There's a big seam right in here in her armpit that needs to be looked after as well. So yeah, maybe on a par with Wonder Woman as far as the number of big fleshy seams that need to be taken care of. Okay, we're in the P&P stage. Priming putty. I've got the putty, I've sanded the obvious seams on the arms, and I've got the putty in the cracks there where they need to go. We'll see how well that settles in. Also in that troublesome elbow joint. And I puttied up the boots a bit to make them look more cohesive. And over on this side we have some body parts in the primer. So we're to the point where everything needs to dry, so I walk away for a bit. Morning, it's Tuesday, and painting has begun in earnest on the Vampirella figure. It's one of those iconic things, and I'm talking to you kids who were kids in the 70s. A lot of you knew about Vampirella only through, if you were lucky to have the Eerie comic or the Famous Monsters of Filmland, any of those, you would see an ad for a poster that was basically Vampirella standing with her hand outstretched and I think a bat on her index finger, and that was the poster that adorned many young lad's bedroom. And it was usually on the back of the door, so that nobody could see it until the door was closed. But that ushered quite a few young lads into manhood. I will wager, right up there with the Farrah Fawcett poster. But I have to tell you that looking back on that poster all these years later, I can't help but think, that lady has a nice tan for a vampire. Which brings us to our subject today, which is we're going to start painting the skin. And she does have a nice tan for a vampire. And I also have to appreciate that even in the 70s, when we all had that poster, is that this was a woman who was, shall we say, had all of her curves in the right place. This was not a pencil-thin stick of a woman. This was somebody, well, like I said, it had some curves. And those curves have been duly covered in this kit. I mean, look at the size of that hip. That's a generous hip. But what we're doing today is I'm starting with a base coat, and the base coat is Model Air Skin Tone. just a basic skin tone, and then we'll put some subtle shading into it, because I'm of a mindset that a lot of the shading in a kit like this should come from daylight. It should come from the lighting in the room. You shouldn't have to accentuate a lot of the shadows. But we're going to put some pinkish hues here and there where it's necessary. But just remember that this is a vampire. She should be a little bit pale, but she is not. So we are going to be reminded of our youths by making sure that she's got a rosy skin tone to her. Like I said, even though she is a creature of the night. So I've got the gloss black out. I've done the boots, and when I say gloss black, I'm talking about X1, plain old X1. I was able to find a bottle of it at the hobby shop the last time. No more semi-gloss black, my friends. X1. Now, we still can't find any flat black anywhere, but luckily I can hit that with a flat coat of clear if I want to. But after you get all the boot parts together, we're almost ready to set those aside and be done, because they get glued onto the bottom of the leg in such a way that, you know, there's a natural seam line there, and you don't need to worry about puttying or patching that seam at all. That's just how her leg goes. So I'm also taking the chance now to kind of look to see if I've got the seams taken care of, and I think I do. I don't see a seam line anywhere there. I mean, I know where it is because I was there when I got rid of it, but it is not very apparent at all. So I'm going to take a little bit of the accent color and just do a splash inside the joints. Same thing like on the palm of the hands and in between the fingers, just to give a little bit of accent color. And the hardest part, I think, in all of this is going to be maintaining the line between the red of her costume and the line of her flesh. So that's the next big trick to watch out for. I'm wondering if I need to try to create some sort of masking for that, or if I'm just masking for trouble if I try that. I see what I did there. I've got some plain old flat red, to me a flat red for that, and then I can add a little bit of this gory red. Ooh, that's even a nice deeper red. Let me see if I like that better than the flat red. Maybe that with the flat red highlight would be a better deal. So the last thing I need to do is I've got the arms in a primer coat of white, because I think the flesh color will show up better against a primer coat of white. And I'm going to do a little bit of sanding on this now that it's dry, and hit it with one more primer coat, and then we should be ready to hit it with a base flesh color too. I'm not looking at this kit taking all that much time. I'm going to spend a lot of the time on painting the face, so I want to make sure it's got a good flesh color base coat on it as well. Okay, so there would be a temptation to spend a lot of time finessing the inside of her left hand, and then you come to realize that when you put it in place, that her left hand is firmly down on her left thigh, so you're not going to see the inside her hand. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. Of course, I'm going to do a lot of work on the outside of it, but I'm not going to worry about that seam. Like you can see, I put one round of putty in it, and I've sanded it, and it's still noticeable, but I'm not going to sweat it because you're never going to see it. So that arm is ready for another dusting of the white primer. This hand, however, is very visible, and you are going to want to make sure, particularly on the forearm here, since there's nothing else adorning her wrist that you can hide behind, you need to make sure that's nice and clean and seam free, because it's going to sit like this and be quite apparent. That's all out in the open, so you need to take care of that. And the biggest part, and something I'm going to shave this down a little bit because it is too tight of a fit and will break the glue you've already put on the the body there. Is fixing that seam there with the putty. From there all the way back and around, that really needs to be addressed. And the problem with it is you need to have this arm painted, particularly on the inside of it. You need to have all this painted, and you need to have this area painted before you close them up, because you're never going to be able to get into there again once that arm is in place. It's less of a problem on this arm because even once it's in place, you still have plenty of access to that seam between the skin and the costume. And this also needs to be, this peg needs to be cleaned up a little, or shaved down a little, so that it fits in easier and you are not, like I said, you're not compromising the glue seam to get it in place. There we go. So it's going to fit in there, and it's going to, like I said, this hand, it's going to fit over her left hip, so you're not worried about painting the inside of that hand. But look at that seam, that's quite apparent. So that's what we're going to take care of, and then hit it with one last coat of primer and go from there. Okay, I've just painted in the costume by hand with this gory red game color paint, just to see how the two colors are playing off against each other. And I like it. I can see where here it is, by the way. I can see where the red of the plain old everyday Tamiya red, I could use that over top of that as a highlight. This might make a better shade color than the actual color, and I don't care for the glossiness of it. I think it would be a fabric, although I could be argued into thinking that it was some sort of latex or something like that, but I believe it just to be a regular fabric with no particular sheen to it. It's kind of sloppy in around here, but I'm gonna be painting on the flesh there, so that'll get more or less covered up. I just wanted to see, and by the time you add the white collar to it, I think that adds that last little bit of contrasting color to it. But yeah, just a thought experiment at this point. Okay, in and amongst the 100 other things I got going on today, I am painting the red of Vampy's suit. I've got a black swash coat on Frankie. I've started working on his skin tones, but he's in the way right now. I've been going rounds back and forth with the tan earth, which is the accent color for the skin, and the skin tone, which is my base color. I've got the skin all taped off here, and I'm starting to put in the reds on the suit. It's a flat red. I'm gonna, now that this flat red is down, I'm going to go in with the black and maybe do just a tiny bit of shading under the shadow areas to darken it up just a wee bit, even though the pre-shading that I put underneath is pretty much doing its job. It wouldn't hurt me to add just a little bit more to that. And then I think we'll call it a night. I don't want to overwork these skin tones. They're coming out nice, and I'm afraid if I do too much more, it's going to end up overworking them, and that's not where you want to be. So letting this dry a bit, and then we'll come in with just a dusting of the darker red. Okay, I've got the accent black in here, and I'm just going to go just in the darkest areas of the costume, just to accentuate some creases. Wouldn't you know, I've run out. Well, that's a good thing, because that keeps me from using too much of it. So now we put this back up to dry. Good morning, happy Wednesday everybody. How is everybody feeling today? We're going to start putting the Vampirella together today, and it's not because I want to, but it's because I have to. I cannot progress any further without putting things together. Now I've got a lot of the body painted, and of course there will always be some touching up around the edge where the costume meets the skin. I cannot do anything more on the shoulders until I put the arms in, and of course that's the domino effect, because I cannot put the arm in until I put the leg in. So I've got to start gluing things together. I am happy with how the legs have turned out in their painting. Really happy with that. So I can go ahead and glue those in. Don't necessarily have to put the boots on, so that's a saving grace, even though that would give me something easier to handle them by, since the boots are black and I wouldn't have to worry about getting my grubby dirty fingers on the clean flesh there. But that's turned out nicely, and now I can put the arms on and deal with those shoulder seams. It's a question of how much of the head I can build before that has to go on. I think I can build the entire thing and then pop it onto the collar. With the collar, you build the whole thing including the collar, and then drop the whole thing on, because you want to have that nice white contrast between the collar and the top of her dress there, or costume. So it's going nicely. I just want to be able to get in and around those shoulders and get the putty in there. So let's start by gluing these legs down, and we'll go from there. Alrighty, so the legs are on. She's got legs and knows how to use them. Nice little torso to this point. Now and I've also touched up the areas that are going to be covered by the arms, so this is my last chance to get to them before I put the one that small of her back keeps wanting to collect dirt. I think it's because even though I keep washing my hands, I get some grubbiness on them. But the last bit, yeah, it's still kind of rough. I don't know whether I should take my lumps with that and live with it, or try to clean it. See, I like the fact that her hand has some contrast over her hip there. It's a little darker. So it's not the cleanest. Looks like some cellulite going on in there, and I don't like it. So I need to smooth it, and now is the best time to do it. So maybe a really light sanding just in the swell here. And this side looks okay. Looks a lot better. So yeah, one last bit of area of touch-up before I can glue these arms down. Invariably, as of late, I have been getting email messages and messages on the YouTube board about the videos saying, tell me what paints you use. Can you give me a list of the paints you used? Hey Lou, what about the paints that you used? For the sake of all that's holy, do a freeze frame right now and write down the numbers of the paints that I am using. It's the only thing you'll see in addition to here that is not listed is a white sandable primer. I primed Vampirella in white, not gray. I primed Frankie in gray, not white. But here are the colors that I used. There's two colors of flesh. They're both Model Air. One is called Tierra Tan Earth. One is called Skin Tone. Then it's just plain old flat red. And then the darker accents are the gory red in the game color. Black for the hair and for the boots, and gold for the jewelry and accents. But that's pretty much all the colors. Now, I've not gotten into what colors I may use for the eye makeup and the eyes and the face and all that. That's a completely different animal. I haven't even started on that yet. But to get your kit to this point, those are the colors I use. Please refer to this part of the video, and don't send me any email saying, Lou, what colors did you use? Okay, the body has dried to the point where I am ready to put the arms on. I'm just going to swamp that joint with the MEK and push the shoulders in, and then it'll be a question of putting the putty on top of that. So the arms are in, and they've had time for the glue to set up. And you can see these shoulder joints are they're pretty clean, but they're obvious, so they need to be puttied in. And what I'm going to do is just take out some of the old Tamiya putty and do a fine line inside there. And I need to unfortunately turn the ceiling fan off for this, because this putty sets up awfully quick, and I can't have it gunking up. I need it to be smooth. And then after that, we're going to let it sit for a real long time before we sand it off. And then we've got to touch up. Now, I've been working on the head to see how much is actually visible after everything is done. And it tells me that I don't need to worry about anything on the back of the shoulder joint. Pretty much only from where it hits the hairline to the armpit there on both sides. So that's all I'm going to need to worry about. And it also tells me that the collar doesn't cover as much of the costume as I thought it did. So I'm going to need to paint some of that red up in there to take care of that as well. And then we can start worrying about everything that has to go into making the pretty face, which is, again, a art form of itself, and one that I am not that confident of. So let's turn off the fan and put a little putty in those shoulder joints. Okay, working on the face, and it's coming out okay, I think. I mean, we are seriously back in Elvira territory, but then again, these two characters are not that dissimilar. So we can go a little exaggerated on the eye makeup and all that kind of stuff. So of course, naturally, when I was putting the putty on the shoulders, I happened to get some on the leg, and there's no way to clean that stuff off other than sanding it off. It doesn't react well to anything else. So lesson learned, try to keep your work area and your hands clean while you're doing this stuff, and maybe this won't happen to you. So that's going to sit for a good long while that putty has a good chance to dry. And like I said, I've been working on the keep you safe. I've been working on the face and the hair to go around it, and it looks better with the hair on, obviously, but we're going to get to the important pupils here pretty soon, and I know that'll be a fun time. We're just going to see how well that works. I'm not wild about how the eyelids were sculpted on this. It's a whole lot of real estate there given over to the eyelashes. Morning, it's Thursday. It is gateway to the weekend, and I think we're going to do a pretty good job of, if not finishing, at least getting very close to finishing the young Miss Vampirella today. I have got the shoulders sanded again. I've got that seam taken care of. I've got the darker of the two flesh colors that I'm using on there. I just need to paint over it with the light and see how well we can blend that in. And then I'm working also on the base today. Now, to change tracks here for a second. Here's the face, and I'm kind of at a stopping point with the face. Not quite as sultry as I was shooting for, and I think the flesh tone is even a little lighter, but than the rest of the body. But I think I'm to the point where if I keep going with it, I'm afraid I'm going to screw something up. So we're going to call good as good there. And I'm lining up all the stuff I still need to do. I've got to finish up the base, get her boots on. I've got to get back over to Frankenstein over there, Frankenstein's monster, the creature. And I have an added surprise, something that was printing all night, or most of yesterday. And I took it off the printer last night and cleaned it up, and I will bring it out now. It's for the lab set, but I think it'll go nicely. You may have noticed this little guy in the background. over the last day or so. This is the tiny Moebius Frankenstein. Well, I spent all of yesterday printing a large one. I didn't spend the time. I set the printer to go, and the printer did all the hard work. But that is in scale, 1/6 scale, with the Stan Arts Lab. I've already stood him in front of it, and he looks just fine. He is a... Stand him up to there. He is about 11.5 inches tall, which at 1/6 scale puts him very close to the 6 foot tall of Gene Wilder. So he's actually 1/6 scale. The hair makes him look a bit like Harpo Marx, I must agree. He's got a combination of Harpo Marx and Willy Wonka. But I think once the painting gets done, that's what's going to make the difference. I thought for a while when I was looking at this that there was something wrong with his undershirt, but no, that's the costume he's wearing in that scene in the movie. There was no big collar or tie there, so now it is possible that I will end up replacing the hose on the stethoscope. I'm not wild with how that printed, but to be fair, that's how the file looks, so it's not something that's great on the file either. So it's possible that I will be replacing that with a rounded hose, or maybe even a piece of rod that I have bent to the right contour. But that's in the offing for the Stan Arts Lab. I've also got coming in the mail an Igor, so we're going to see how well we can dress up that set. But you can get a sense of the difference in the scale when you realize this is 1/6 and that is 1/8. And we keep coming back to the problem of the scale fitting the Stan Arts Lab. This would be a 1/6 skull to go with it, if that helps. Here's a 1/8. This will show you the difference between the two. But this is something I could use for a set decoration as well. And this is closer to the 1/8, or the 1/8 of the smaller version. But there you go. Small Frank, small Frederick, big Frederick. Continuing work on the Vampirella base, I have attached the boots to the base because it's going to be almost impossible to do it the other way. This joint to the legs is a lot easier to glue at this point than it is to glue the boots to the legs and then try to jam them into this base because of the weird angles that they take. So now that those are in, I'm going to take one last look at her shoulders. I think those are looking pretty good. So we're going to take the masking off here, and I can see a little bit of touch up on that red that I need to do, and then we will attach that, and then the last thing to do will be to add the head. So I've taken the Tamiya clear, and I've done a coating over her nails. I've also done it on her lips and her eyes, but I'm not 100% ready to sign off on that head yet, so that's why you're not seeing it just quite yet. The rest of the body, though, I think I'm about as good as I'm going to get on that. So let me take the newly purchased red, which is, I'm so glad that our hobby shop had the Tamiya's back in stock. Still no flat black, but was able to get some red. We'll touch that last bit, and then we'll be ready to glue it down to the feet. Okay, you can insert your head jokes here wherever you would like to, but I've got the base done. I've got the body glued to the feet, to the calves there. Got the Tombstone in, and the bats I'm working on. I've done a dry brushing over the gloss black, and I think I want to do a wash over that in a bit, but I'm letting that Tombstone dry really well because it is one of those texture paints that go on very thick, and in this case it gives the look of old concrete just like a tombstone would be made of, but it is real thick, so I'm letting that set up really well. And I think the last thing to do, obviously, is to attach the head. I am making myself happy with this. Now, I want to go in and play with some highlights in her hair. I know that, you know, your temptation is to make the hair look shiny and glossy and all of that, but that has a tendency to look fake too. So I'm trying to temper that with a little bit of flat black, maybe a gloss dry brushing over the flat would be the best solution. Something that gives me glossy highlights but doesn't make the whole thing look fake. So that's kind of what I'm playing with, and once I've finished that out, then it will be ready to attach, and then the whole figure will be done. So I'm kind of spacing that work out so that I take my time with it. I don't want to rush through it. So I think the next step will be to do a flat coat on the back of her hair, and then the glossy dry brush on top of it. Okay, we're getting ready to wrap up for today. I've been working on this kind of off and on today because we're really down to just a couple more things to finish it. So I decided to take 5 minutes out and build up the staging that comes with the Frankenstein kit, even though we're not going to be using this. I can't see anytime in the future, but wouldn't you know, it's a wooden floor and a stone wall. I'm starting to see wooden floors and stone walls in my sleep, so we're just going to leave that for the time being. I've got one last round of cleanup now that Vampy is on the base, and easier, frankly, to hold without worrying about getting my smudgy fingers on the paint, because I've got more areas, more things that I can hold it by. I do want to put some tape on the red costume here and just spritz those shoulders one last time with a mixture. But first I want to smooth off the just a couple of the putty boogers that I've had from the last couple of rounds here. Just doing a little cleanup. And if I hit that now with a with just a nice light skin tone, that should finish up all I need to do, and then I can pop the head on and she'll be done. Morning everybody, it's Friday. It's the last work day of the week. It's only fitting it's still going to be the last work day on the Vampirella kit. Now honestly, I could have finished this a couple of days ago, but I've been taking my good sweet time trying to make it come out as good as I possibly can make it. Now there's one last bit. I want to touch up those shoulders one last time, even though they're going to be mostly covered by hair. I want to touch the paint on those, just one last blending coat, and then we'll be ready to button this all up. I've got the base all finished from yesterday. I may want to go over these hanging bats just a little bit with some dry brushing, just to bring out some of the contours in that. I need to push this tombstone down a little bit further. It didn't want to go the whole way down, and I think that had a lot to do with how thick the paint was on it. So I will maybe, I might have to chop the pins off the bottom and just do a good old butt joint with some epoxy. Let's get these sanded down and see. Probably it just has some thick paint on them. That has a habit of happening when I use this big texture paint. Let's see if I can get this all the way down. If I can, then I won't hassle it too much further. No, it's a tight fit. I think I might have to clean that off and just do a quickie epoxy joint. I didn't see how tight it was going to be back before I put any paint on it. And then of course you add thick paint to it, and that compounds the problem. See if I can get that to fit flat. Ooh, stress and strain. No, I think I'm going to have to end up taking those pins off. Okay, the time has come, the walrus said, to attach the head of the young lass here. And this is going to be one of those things that only wants to happen once I get it on there, because I have to kind of bend it in around the back of that neck. I don't want to put it in and then pull it back out and put glue on it, so I'm going to go ahead and sop up the neck hole with some MEK. Just painting it on inside there. Now the collar is going to cover a multitude of sins here, so it also lubricates things as you're going. So there you go. That is set. Let that dry. And I noticed that as much as I work on it, I notice this thing that keeps happening. And it's, you know, it reminds me of the Elvira kit. And that is the hair seam. You can sand, you can file, you can putty, you can bake. That hair seam still wants to come back. And maybe it's because I know where it is. And maybe it's because it's just that obvious. But especially on straight-haired characters, for some reason, it's just more noticeable. Wonder Woman got away with it because there were curls and waves, and you can kind of hide the seam in that. But the straight hair really calls out that seam, and I may want to hit that with a little bit of filler after the head has had a chance to dry in. But I'm thinking, oops, she popped up out of her leg. I'm thinking that, whew, that's something that did not have enough glue in it. I thought I had taken care of that sufficiently yesterday, but apparently not. So let's make sure the fingers are all clean. Yeah, I didn't have enough glue in her legs, so let's add some more. Okay, so the calves got re-glued. Sorry about that. You know, it's better to have too little than too much, because you can always add and re-glue something, but it's tougher to clean up a glue splurge if you put too much in it. So we're going to let her sit, come back at the end of the day, do some final touches, and then call her a done model kit. And I'm going to turn my attentions over here to Frank. I'm not going to kill myself on doing this backdrop, the door and the dungeon and all that. I put it together more or less as a curiosity to see what it was like, but I don't plan on using it because it is so huge. So I'm just going to I'll probably go back in the stash. Don't know what I would do with it really, but yes, what knockers. And that will that plays into the next kit that I'm building. So do some cleanup here and pull out Master Frank, and we'll start doing a little bit more aging on him. There's not much more to do. Like I said, I'm going to take this dungeon and kind of push that to the back. We're not going to concern ourselves too much with that. And we're going to see what kind of aging I need to do on the both the skin and on his clothing. He's a snappy dresser. I got to tell you, that black on black look, it never goes out of style, but it does make for a boring model. I'm painting on Frankie's face, and I'm having some fun, just throwing as many colors into there as I want, bringing all of my zombie painting experience to bear, just throwing in a lot of greens and tiny bit of flesh just to pink it up a little, some greenish washes, some yellow green undertones. I can see why people would like painting Frankenstein. I always thought it to be a fairly boring subject, but hey, I'm getting into it. So now the last thing to do is really to work on his clothing, and then he'll be done. Playing a bit with Frankie's clothes, his his sharp-dressed manness. And I've thrown some brown at the pants, and I've thrown some gray on the jacket. I'm going to let that sit for a while, come back to it, see how I feel about it. Probably will end up brushing or washing down the jacket to darken it back up a little bit. I think it's a little too bright, but I like the brown, the mud on his pants. I think that works nicely. I might want to throw some actual mud on the bottom of his boots. But I think we're getting into the right ballpark. If not, we're at least in the parking lot of the right ballpark. Okay, a final splash of mud on the creature's boots, you know, because he's been out taking a stroll, and a little bit of mud on the base of the Vampy, what I'm calling the Vampenstein collection, the two of them, the Vampensteins. And that's going to bring them to a close today. We're going to let that dry, and then we'll come back and have some final thoughts. Just move those just like that. Don't they make a lovely couple? And here you go. One last look at the happy couple, ready for their night on the town. A fun couple of builds here. Like I said, more not enough to fill a week by individually, but you know, we could fill up the week by doing the both of them. So that's why I chose to do it that way. And there you go, from the toes to the top of their little pointy heads. The Chip and Joanna, the Sonny and Cher, the George and Gracie of the monster world. And that's going to do it for this week. Our little foray into the monster world. Now, this all started as an adjunct to the wonderful Frankenstein lab that I worked on a couple weeks ago, and I kind of wanted to give them something to go in front of the lab, but it turned into, oddly enough, to have a life of its own. I decided to do these projects independent of the lab because I've got something more devious in mind for the lab. I've got one thing coming in the mail that's going to be a wonderful addition to the lab, and I've got, of course, I've got the Frederick that I printed earlier this week that I'm going to start on. I don't know if I'm going to do them next week. I've kind of figured out right now. Maybe I'll break it up and do that in a couple of weeks. Pick something else out of the stash for next week. So until then, y'all be good. Be good to each other. Be safe. Be smart. Enjoy these waning days of summer. It's been actually a beautiful time to be outside and sit and soak in the nature this week. So get outside and enjoy it. I'll talk to you next week.